Hi everyone, it's Ardith, and today is day 2 of the Pretty Pink Posh blog hops to celebrate the arrival of the October release. It's filled with holiday fun, so pop over to my blog to get all the details and the blog list. There's a direct link in the description below. I made some cards with a background technique that was inspired by my friend Natalie. She did heat embossing and then selective ink blending in a way that is both simple and unusual, and I knew I had to give it a try. I started with a panel of white cardstock and some Wow embossing ink along with the Snowflakes stamp from the Winter Borders set. My ink pad was feeling a bit dry, so I re-inked it with this fun re-inker. Picture the rollerball lip gloss of the 70s and 80s. That's exactly what this is. The stamp was placed horizontally on the MISTI, so it will stamp at the very top of my panel. Then I moved the panel up by 7/8 of an inch each time and I stamped again until the whole panel was filled with snow. My math skills got a good workout each time I moved the panel, making sure it was in exactly the right spot. A full inch between impressions would have been much easier, but this measurement meant that there was no extra space between each row, and it truly looked like one big background stamp. I sprinkled some opaque bright white embossing powder over the top, tapped off the excess onto a piece of paper so that I could pour it back into the jar later. Then I got my foil-lined shoebox lid, which I used to try and reduce warping, and also so I'm not having to hold on to the project while I melt the powder with my heat gun. White embossing can be tricky since it's hard to see, and you want to be sure that everything is fully melted and shiny before you start ink blending. So Natalie did her blending vertically, but I thought it would be fun to try a diagonal method. The only problem with diagonal is getting your lines parallel and evenly spaced, but I've got a quick tip for making that really easy: 1-inch Post-it tape. I put my first piece down on the panel and I blended limoncello ink up toward the top corner, fading it out before I got to the edge. I used a microfiber cloth to buff over top of the embossing and remove any extra ink that was sitting on top. Then I cut a new piece of Post-it tape and I stuck it down exactly under the piece that was already there. So now my next line is exactly 1 Post-it tape width away from the last one, and it's completely parallel. I removed the first piece of tape and blended my next color, Orange Twist, along the top edge of the tape, again fading out toward the yellow. Again, I buffed the blending with the microfiber cloth to remove excess ink, and then it was time to start over again for the next color, which was Party Dress. I'm using sponge daubers here because the space is quite small, and these give me quite a lot of control. Once again, buff off the ink and then put down the next piece of tape. I reused a previous piece, but I turned it so that the clean edge is the one I'll be blending against, since orange and purple would create a muddy brown if they mixed. Now I don't know if you can see, but I didn't even have my ink pads out. My daubers are so old and well used that they're full of ink, and since I wanted to fade out to white in a narrow space, I didn't add any more ink. When I finished buffing the Flirty Fuchsia, I made a mistake and lifted the tape before putting down the next piece, but that was easily fixed, and I moved on to the next color, which was Fiesta Blue. My final color was Lime Ricky, and you can see this fun bright rainbow is really coming together. I love that the diagonal lines mean that I'm not reinforcing those natural horizontal splits in the snowflake pattern. Even vertical blending might have created a pattern since I stamped down in the same place each time. I trimmed the panel with the stitched rectangle die from Stitch Notes, and I cut a sentiment strip with the fishtail label die from Stitched Labels 1. I also cut a couple of the snowmen from the new Joy set, and I cut them out with their coordinating dies in my Gemini Junior. I'm going to use the label vertically due to the size of the sentiment, which I know I haven't shown you yet. To get the placement right, I attached the snowmen to the bottom of the label, covering the fishtails. I put the first one directly on the label, and I popped up the second one with some foam tape. These guys are so cool and minimal with no faces or buttons, but you could add them if you wanted to. Okay, so here's the sentiment from the new Winter Signs set. It's tiny and it says "Let It Snow." Perfect! And it fits perfectly on this little label. To try and get my spacing right on the label, I got out the little mouse pad from my mini MISTI. It has a grid on it. I taped the label down with repositionable tape. This means I can use the grid to visually place the sentiments evenly along the label. I stamped the one at the top first, and then the one on the bottom. This allows me to center the middle one between the two, rather than having to actually measure. I'm sure it's not perfect, but I don't think it's too far off. I popped the whole label up on foam tape, and I got the mouse pad back out to help me center it on the blended panel. But oh my goodness, I couldn't even be bothered to count the lines, so I just eyeballed it in the end. To add some sparkle, I got some of the silver sequins from the new Celebration mix, and I glued them around the sentiment strip. I put the whole thing onto an oyster card base to finish it off. Although it's not traditional, I think this happy rainbow is perfect for a snowy Christmas card. In fact, I made another panel the same way, and then I used an inlaid die cut method to get 2 cards from one panel. I used the new Joy set. Those big letters look fabulous with the contrast from the black card bases, and this time I used gold sequins to finish them off. Don't forget to head to my blog for all the hop details. There's a link below that will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up below and subscribe to my channel for more inspiration. Product links are below in the description and also on my blog. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.